It's a story Canadians know all too well, a recurring chapter in our national experience that seems to play out every few years, always with a familiar sense of anxiety and uncertainty. The US announces a new tariff, and suddenly, a Canadian industry is threatened. The news spreads quickly, sending shockwaves through boardrooms, factories, and family homes alike. Politicians in Ottawa promise a strong response, vowing to defend Canadian interests. But for many it's déjà vu, a cycle that seems impossible to break, no matter who's in power. These disputes aren't just numbers on a spreadsheet. They ripple through communities, from Windsor's auto plants to BC's logging towns, affecting real people and livelihoods. The goods at stake change with each dispute. Sometimes it's cars, other times dairy, or even digital services, but the underlying tension remains constant, a persistent undercurrent in our economy. Canada, as the smaller partner in this relationship, must always adapt, finding creative ways to respond and protect its interests, even when the odds seem stacked against us. This cycle of challenge and adaptation has shaped Canada's identity for generations, forging a sense of resilience and unity in the face of external pressures. How do we stand up for ourselves without risking our most vital relationship? It's a question that echoes in homes, workplaces, and government offices across the country. These aren't abstract questions, they're urgent and personal, touching the lives of everyday Canadians who wonder what the future holds for their families and communities. Trade wars become part of the national conversation, sparking debates in cafes, newsrooms, and parliament, and reinforcing the challenge of living next to a superpower that can change the rules overnight. Each dispute leaves a mark, shaping not only policy, but also our culture and the Canadian sense of self, reminding us of our need to adapt, persevere, and define our own path. By understanding this pattern, we see how Canada's identity has been forged in the crucible of its relationship with the US, learning to balance cooperation with independence. This history is more than just a record of past disputes, it's a roadmap for navigating today's challenges, and a reminder that Canada's story is one of resilience, adaptation, and hope for the future. To truly grasp the roots of today's disputes between the United States and Canada, we have to look back, sometimes centuries back, into the tangled history that shaped both nations. After the American Revolution, British loyalists, unwilling to live under the new American government, fled north into what would become Canada. Their arrival helped define Canada's identity as not America, a place with its own values, loyalties, and ambitions. Early Canadian leaders, wary of being overshadowed by their powerful neighbor, introduced policies like the National Policy of 1879. This policy imposed high tariffs on American goods, aiming to protect fledgling Canadian industries from US economic dominance and encourage homegrown growth. These decisions weren't just about economics, they were about forging a distinct Canadian nation, one that could stand on its own and foster a sense of unity and pride among its people. Meanwhile, the US often viewed Canada as a convenient supplier of resources, timber, minerals, wheat. But Canadians worried about being reduced to a mere colony, existing only to serve American needs. At the heart of the relationship is a core tension. The US wants easy access to Canadian resources and markets, while Canada seeks to protect its own interests and maintain control over its destiny. It's a bit like two brothers, one much bigger, the other fiercely protective of his own space and identity, always aware of the other's influence. The US, with its vast economy, can often act without much thought for its northern neighbor. Yet, a single policy shift in Washington can send shockwaves through Canada's economy, forcing Canadian leaders to react and adapt. This power imbalance is a constant feature of the relationship, shaping everything from trade to culture to politics. Over time, the products at the center of disputes have changed: agriculture, cars, digital goods, but the underlying dilemma remains the same: how to balance integration with independence. The question persists: how does Canada protect its own interests, culture, and economy while being so deeply integrated with a giant next door? Today's headlines about trade disputes and negotiations are just the latest chapter in a very old story. The pattern endures, echoing through generations, as both countries continue to navigate this complicated partnership. Trade disputes with the US are never just about economics. They shape culture too. When US tariffs hit Canadian industries, it sparks national pride and a drive to protect a way of life. The lumberjack isn't just a worker, it's a symbol of Canadian grit, To resist cultural assimilation, Canada created policies like CanCon, ensuring Canadian stories are told. These rules launched careers and built a unique cultural identity, even as critics debated their impact. Now, the battleground is digital, with streaming giants challenging old protections. New laws like the Online Streaming Act are the latest effort to keep Canadian culture alive. The goal remains: Canadian stories must thrive, not just survive in America's shadow. Trade and culture are forever intertwined. The softwood lumber dispute is the ultimate example of recurring trade conflict. For decades, the U.S. claims Canada subsidizes lumber, citing low stumpage fees on public land. Canada denies this, but the cycle repeats. U.S. tariffs, Canadian legal challenges, years of uncertainty. Even when Canada wins in trade panels, the process drags on, costing billions. For logging towns, this means job losses and anxiety. The dispute shows the limits of free trade agreements. Legal frameworks can't resolve deep-rooted interests. It's become a symbol of American protectionism and Canadian frustration. Despite NAFTA and USMCA, the saga continues. The script rarely changes, making it a case study in the repetitive dance of Canada-US trade. It's the ultimate déjà vu. Not all trade talks are battles. Sometimes they're breakthroughs that change the course of history for entire nations. The 1965 Auto Pact was a rare triumph, a landmark agreement that would reshape the economic landscape of North America. Before the pact, Canada's auto industry was inefficient, fragmented, and at risk of collapse. Factories struggled to compete, and jobs were constantly under threat. The Auto Pact created a new kind of managed free trade, one that balanced open borders with strategic requirements. Cars and parts could now cross the border duty-free, allowing manufacturers to streamline production and reduce costs. But there was a catch. Automakers had to build in Canada to sell in Canada. This requirement transformed the industry, sparking a manufacturing boom and creating thousands of well-paying jobs for Canadian workers. Cities like Oshawa were revitalized, turning into economic powerhouses almost overnight, their fortunes tied to the success of the auto sector. The pact became a model for how Canada could leverage access to the vast U.S. market to build its own strength. But this success was always fragile, dependent on political will and global economic trends. By 2001, the World Trade Organization ruled against the pact, declaring its special provisions unfair under new global trade rules. And so, the Auto Pact ended. The loss was deeply felt across the country, especially when the 2008 financial crisis hit, leading to plant closures and mass layoffs that devastated communities. Free trade continued under NAFTA, keeping borders open for business, but the crucial production guarantees that had protected Canadian jobs were gone, leaving the industry more vulnerable than ever. The Auto Pact's legacy is mixed. On one hand, it showed the power of smart policy and international cooperation, proving that when nations work together, they can achieve remarkable things and share prosperity. But it also revealed that even the best deals can unravel when global rules change or political winds shift. It's a powerful reminder that Canada's economic fate is often shaped by forces beyond its control. Even in partnership, the balance is delicate. The lesson is clear: success requires constant vigilance, adaptability, and a willingness to fight for national interests in a changing world. Sometimes, the trade war is about culture, not just goods. In the 1990s, Canada used tax laws to protect its magazine industry, keeping ad dollars at home. When Sports Illustrated launched a Canadian edition, Ottawa saw it as a threat and imposed a steep tax. The U.S. called it protectionist and threatened retaliation. The dispute escalated, with the U.S. targeting Canadian exports. Ultimately, the WTO sided with the U.S., forcing Canada to compromise. The battle showed that in globalized trade, old protectionist tools were losing power. The U.S. treats culture like any other commodity. Canadian policymakers had to rethink how to support culture in a borderless world. The magazine fight was a turning point. It blurred the line between economic and cultural sovereignty. Canada's response to U.S. trade pressure is threefold: legal challenge, political negotiation, and public mobilization. First, Canada uses trade agreements dispute mechanisms, often winning symbolic victories. Diplomacy is constant. Leaders seek compromise while projecting strength at home. Sometimes, concessions in one area win gains in another. Trade wars also spark buy Canadian movements, fueling economic patriotism. While symbolic, these campaigns unite citizens and reinforce national solidarity. Industries under threat diversify, seeking new markets beyond the US. The lesson, over-reliance on the US is a vulnerability. Canada adapts by fighting back, seeking compromise, and building resilience. The recurring trade wars have forced Canada to evolve. Each conflict is a test of independence and ingenuity. The strategy, resist, adapt, and assert identity. It's how Canada endures. Trade conflicts are more than economic. They're a mirror for Canadian identity. Each dispute sparks debate about who Canadians are and what they value. Canadians are deeply North American, yet distinctly not American. Trade wars draw a line, reinforcing differences and national pride. Defending public health care, culture, and family farms becomes a statement of values. The underdog narrative, Canada as David to America's Goliath, unites the country. Media coverage amplifies moments of defiance, creating a rally around the flag effect. But there's also anxiety. Dependence on the US raises questions about sovereignty. The cycle of conflict and resolution is central to the Canadian experience. Trade wars shape politics, economy, and identity like few other issues. On October 19, 2025, global trade is more complex than ever, yet for Canada, the core challenge remains, managing the US relationship. The products change, but the dynamics of power and identity persist. Understanding this history is essential for navigating the present. Past disputes, lumber, autos, culture, show these are structural realities, not isolated events. Canada must always be ready to defend its interests, adapt, and innovate. The lesson: don't retreat, but build multiple pillars of strength. Sovereignty means charting your own course, even in deep integration. By learning from the past, Canadians can face future conflicts with perspective and confidence. They have fought, adapted, and endured before. This history is a source of strength for whatever comes next.